This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store, rate the podcast on Spotify, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. If you are having doubts going through deconstruction, you do not have to do it alone. Join us in our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. If we just met at the Portland PodConf 23, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you're a regular listener, I'm really glad you're here as well. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews our guest today, Kat Delmar. Kat grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church. There was a lot of bodily control from everything from caffeine to purity culture. As Kat grew up, she realized that the pat answers she was given within the Seventh-day Adventist church didn't fit the reality of the world she was living in. Today, Kat has a spirituality around nature and the fulfillment that she gets being in nature. Kat has an Instagram. It is at Kat Mangrove, as well as a link tree, and we will have the links in the show notes. Here is Arlene interviewing Kat Delmar.
Kat Delmar, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited. I have been following you on Instagram since sometime last year. I have no idea how I found you. I'm sure Instagram or someone else that I followed was like, you would like this account. And yes, I've enjoyed your content. Yeah, so thanks so much for being online and putting great things out there.
Yes, and thanks to the algorithm for bringing us together.
Yes, every now and then I'm like, okay, I can be okay with this AI. This worked out for me. So we usually begin with just tell me the spiritual background that you grew up in.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Kat, and I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist.
That's
so it's
right.
a sect of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised Adventist, and my dad was raised Adventist, and his mom and his dad. So at least on my dad's side, from his grandfather all the way down to me and my sister, we've been Adventist. So, a few generations back. And the thing is, it's like my mom had to convert to Adventism to marry my dad. I mean, had to convert. I say that kind of loosely, but for all practical purposes, yeah, she had to convert. But my dad was really the one that was raised that way. So because my dad was more culturally Adventist and my mom kind of did it out of, I would say, obligation, not necessarily because she believed in it, there always was this kind of like tug of war a little bit between the parents. So it was a pretty inconsistent situation with us, like a pretty inconsistent rearing as far as religion was concerned. Because, for instance, Seventh-day Adventists, they refrain from working on Saturday or on the Sabbath. So from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, you're not supposed to be going to work, doing any labor like around the house. Some people don't even want to drive or go to restaurants or anything like that, pump gas on Sabbath. So they try to, the people that really adhere to that Sabbath, they really try to get everything done during the week so that by Friday sundown, they can start, opening the Sabbath with prayer and all that stuff. We never really did that. Only sometimes when like family would come to visit or friends of my dad, we would pretend to be a little bit more pious. But my mom often worked on Saturdays, but my dad really did not. My dad was pretty good about not working on Sabbath. And, because my mom was working on Saturdays, my dad would kind of inconsistently take us to church, and then we kind of fall out of it, take us, and we go to Sabbath school, then not go for months. And then by the time, that was during my childhood. And so then by the time my mom and my sister and I, we moved away from South Florida to North Florida, we really weren't going to church at that point. Like sometimes my dad would bring us whenever he would come to visit, or whenever we would go down to South Florida to visit. but it was really inconsistent as we were like in our preteen area, like that era.
So how did your mom grow up? What was her religious background?
Because they're both Jamaican,
Oh,
so
okay.
obviously Christianity is the predominant religion in Jamaica. Uh, I would say like Anglican, Baptist, like that kind of, like a general Protestant, but probably more Anglican.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say her family wasn't as devout.
Hmm.
I think they would consider themselves Christians. Even back then, they would consider themselves Christians. But from what I've heard from other family members, there was a little bit more of like religious syncretism. Like there was perhaps some people were
Mm.
practicing some obia, which is the Jamaican version, I guess, for lack of a better term, the Jamaican version of voodoo. So there was some dabbling in that, some religious syncretism, but mostly Christian.
Oh, okay. My family were kind of what nominal Christians. Like you just go to church. I grew up in Georgia, and
Yes,
everyone you just go to church. There's nobody really asks you whether you believe or take it seriously or care. It's just that's just part of what you do.
exactly.
But then thinking about the like syncretism, there were certain just little superstitions that my family had that I thought I feel like when I eventually became a Christian in college, I thought, why are you superstitious about this? Like, how did this get pulled into your beliefs? This feels like it should be something that they would if someone else were superstitious. They would judge them for their kind of superstitious stuff. But just little things that felt, I wish I could think of an example, but just, yeah, strange things that it was like, you've combined this with something else and you're okay with it.
Definitely.
It didn't seem to bother anybody.
Definitely. Like
Yeah.
with my mom, she was always interpreting dreams. So if I said I had a strange dream, she would take that as something superstitious and, use whatever
Wow.
knowledge that she had about that and interpret the dreams. So maybe it was something similar to that.
Yeah. There were things like that, like, oh, not necessarily dream interpretation, but my mom was funny about not talking about dreams if they were bad dreams or not speaking certain words. Like it was just strange things that didn't feel biblical. It was like it would conjure some kind of demonic thing, which I
Yeah.
guess some people could consider Christian. It just felt different. But I became a Christian in college,
Yes.
and it was Calvinism and very like head knowledge type stuff.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it was different. I did not grow up in the church what my family believed. So you guys moved to North Florida. You said your
Yes.
mom and your sister and you was your
Yes.
dad in the picture or
Well, he stayed down in South Florida.
oh, okay.
And so we ended up having two houses. There was one down here and one in North Florida. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like, latchkey kid, almost like a single motherhood situation. I went from essentially a two-parent household to now it was more like a one-parent household. And, I was young and my mom was working. So, my sister and we would be we were getting ourselves up to go to school when we were very young, but we'd get ourselves up together. No one would be home when we got home from school. Making Kraft macaroni and cheese. Like, I can't really eat that anymore because I ate so much of it as a kid. And, a lot of weekends spent, obviously not going to church because my mom was working, but a lot of boring weekends just left to our own devices. And so then by the time, like as far as the Adventist story is concerned, by the time I was like 16, 15, 16, and I had my permit, that's like when I entered a different phase of my religious like life, I guess. Because at that age, teens are kind of starting to contemplate like what life is and like what the meaning of it is. And like what kind of person they should be, I guess. And so I was thinking, oh, to be a good teenager, whatever, young adult, I should start going to church by myself.
Okay.
So, and my sister wasn't really interested in going to the Adventist church because I think she, by then she kind of was on her own path. She's still a Christian, but she's a non-denominational Christian. So by then she was already kind of starting to leave Seventh Day Adventism. So I just went to church by myself. There was a local church in the area, and yeah, I kind of was pretty close with the people there. There were a few young people in the church around my age,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of them were really nice because it was a very small church with a new pastor who was a young pastor. And so it felt a little bit like a family, especially because, yeah, my dad wasn't at home. My mom was always at work. I was in a pretty rigorous high school curriculum. So that was nice to have, like, oh, these are some people that maybe I can look up to. But, also when you're 16, you're starting to come into your own as a person, and there's a rebellious nature that comes into play. Which I'm not sure how rebellious it is to wear pants, want to have a piercing or two. Just like little things like that became a problem because Adventists, again, they're very conservative, not only with the Sabbath keeping, but with like dress. Like they really don't pierce their
Oh,
ears.
yeah.
The tattoos are forbidden. There's a lot of control of the body. you know I mean, we know all about like purity culture and that kind of stuff. Like that's something that I'm sure a lot of people on this podcast or other people in the deconstruction community talk about, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a strain on the relationship with the body. Like even Adventists, they don't want you to eat caffeine, and they follow like a lot of the Leviticus dietary laws that even a lot of
Oh,
Jewish people that I
wow.
know don't follow. Most of the Jewish people
Yeah.
that I know don't follow those rules. But Adventists they don't eat shrimp, no pork, um, no duck. Only animals that chew the cud and all that. Like it's just all this extra stuff.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I was following all those rules. I was a virgin, whatever. But I just wanted to get my ears pierced. And I remember having to hide my ear piercing because I felt like I was going to be shamed about it. I mean, they found out, but there was definitely this like dark cloud of shame for getting my ears pierced at 16 years old.
Oh, my heavens. You're almost an adult
Yeah,
and your ears pierced. There are so many far worse things that teenagers would want to do.
yeah,
And I'm so sorry that there was such a cloud of shame
yeah,
for such a simple thing.
yeah. So glad that I'm out of that life now. Like, I'm so glad I'm much older and that I can just see it for what it is, which is BS.
Yeah,
um,
it's literally a bunch of made up stuff that someone thought, we don't like this, so we're going to make a list of the things you can't do because we don't like these things.
yeah, it's literally a bunch of fairy tales that we're using to dictate people's lives. Ugh.
Hmm.
And to control people. That's really what it's all about. It's about control. Like I said, control of the body, control of your mind, control of your spirit. Literally, like, and when I say spirit, I don't necessarily mean like spirit in the religious sense. I mean like your essence, who you are.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just kind of got fed up with the control aspect. And there were a few people in the church that were like vaguely racist. And I just, I just found, I was finding it to be boring, and just like I didn't really fit in. Like I didn't want to be that devout. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah, and also school was pretty rigorous. Like as I was entering those last couple years of high school, I was like, I don't even think I have time for this, because they're saying don't study on Sabbath. I gotta study. Like, so that's another thing. School, and that was kind of a recurring theme um as I got a little bit older. But I just fell out of that situation. There was something else that actually happened as well. Two other things that kind of made me pull away. The pastor, he was from South Africa, and he was, like I said, a young pastor. He seemed pretty genuine, pretty kind. I did like him as a person, but there was
Hmm.
some rumor about how he definitely didn't want to have a black wife, because he was looking for a wife because he was about 40 something and unmarried, and he was a white South African, and somehow that became the rumor. And I was like, okay, I know I was 16 and I didn't really understand much about racism at 16.
Hmm.
uh I mean, I had some experiences that were racial, but I didn't understand like society and like the social construct of racism too well, like the systemic situation. And I was like, but this is weird. Like, I'm a black person, and this pastor is using race as a criteria for who's worthy of marrying him. So I was kind of all the way turned off by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah. And then there was like a deacon in the church who, I don't know, something happened one time at church camp where like we were eating breakfast and he like fed me some of his food, and I thought that was friggin' weird.
Yeah. That feels very bizarre.
And it's
Do
not
you know why? Like what?
um I don't think I even asked if it was, well, maybe I may have asked like, is it good, whatever he was eating. It was like, I think it was applesauce with peanut butter and jelly or something like that. I think it was bread with peanut butter and applesauce, or apple butter. And I don't think I had ever tried apple butter before. And he offered it to me, like with his fork, and he fed it to me. He didn't let me just take it myself, which I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it, but I wouldn't do that to somebody at my big age now that I'm in my 30s. I wouldn't feed a kid from my spoon, feed them like a teenager, maybe a young kid, like a baby. But I just found that to be strange.
That is strange.
I felt
I
uncomfortable.
don't even know how to wonder about it. Like that just feels bizarre. Yeah.
I mean, it was giving me just unsavory vibes. So that was
Mhm.
again that was one of the last straws, and I was like, okay, I'm out. Like I don't feel comfortable.
Yes. And before we started recording, you and I were just talking about how our bodies know things.
Yeah,
And there is truth in like when our bodies are like, something doesn't feel right. We often, not they're not perfect, but we often need to pay attention to that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I've had a hard time with that like all my life. And literally, my upbringing was such that you're supposed to not lean on your own understanding. Like, literally, that's one of the most quoted
Mhm.
phrases in the Christian community. And like the damage of that, I mean, it has lasted for years. And even though I'm more aware, I still, because I have really good intuition, and it's
Mm.
got better, but I still second guess my intuition because of
Mhm.
that upbringing, where like I'm not supposed to trust my humanness because that's evil.
Yes, because that's evil. We're supposed to trust other humans who apparently aren't evil and know things because they have heard from God, or even like I think back to the times of when it's we were told to read the Bible more or pray more. If we could only know if it was from God, if it went in line with the things we already believed from the people around us and the way we have been told to interpret the Bible. It still came down to other people's interpretation of the Bible or what prayer is or however. But it never occurred to me to trust my own judgment and question the other people's judgment, if that makes sense.
Definitely, definitely. Like, as if some people have revelations or have access to revelations that I don't have access to. It's a power structure. It's all about securing power, because if they're the ones that have preferential access to these revelations, then they can delegate out and dictate what everyone else is supposed to do, because everyone else is beneath them because they don't have access to these insights or whatever.
And I think back to like we were Presbyterian for most of the time as an adult, and we believed in what was it called? Oh, the priesthood of all believers. So we believed that like everyone had access to God's revelation, like nobody was above, but someone like John Piper or Matt Chandler or the pastor or just anyone, if they said something and interpreted scripture, it was, even though we weren't supposed to think it was probably more holy and more correct, we still did. They were celebrity pastors. They knew all the things. So yeah, our functional theology was very different than what we said we actually believed.
For sure. And that kind of reminds me of how, like, even if we kind of zoom out a little bit to Christianity as a whole, Christians are really, I mean, I have more experience with Christianity, but from what I've seen, Christians really uh, have a monopoly on this doctrine that their way is the only way. And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't believe this religion, you're going to hell. So, and by that time, by 16, I was already thinking to myself, I just don't think that's true, because what about people that are, you know, living in, I don't know, Bangladesh, or on a deserted island somewhere, not deserted, but like some island that doesn't have access to missionaries or whatever. Are they just going to hell because they didn't hear about the European version of Christianity? How does that even make sense? Like, why would the only divinity, if there is such a thing, why would that be um, just relegated to just this little area of the Middle East? And
Yes.
so it was starting not to make sense. And I even talked to one of my aunts about this, who was an Adventist on my dad's side. And she's like, yeah, well, I don't think those people are going to hell either. So even she, as a pretty decently devout Adventist, didn't believe that you had to believe in Christ to go to heaven or whatever. So I was already starting to think that by the time I was in my mid-teens.
Yeah, I was going to ask, were you asking questions outwardly as a teen? Were you asking other people, or were these just internal questions that you were curious about?
Well, I think the main thing that I asked about was, yeah, what if you don't believe? What if you're coming from somewhere where you don't have access to this particular doctrine? And even like, yeah, my dad said, oh, in the Bible it says, God will wink at you. Or there's some, I forget where exactly it is in
Oh,
scripture, because I
I
have
don't
not
know that.
opened my Bible in years. But yeah, that there is this idea, this ideology that you will receive some type of mercy because you just didn't know.
Oh,
Like if you're
okay.
a baby, or if you're from somewhere that doesn't have access to this information.
Okay. I don't know if we had a name for it. We had a similar idea for people with like cognitive special needs. It was like,
Sure.
well, God will somehow reveal himself, or babies or children and even elderly people, anyone who I guess was not just neurotypical adult who can understand all the theological things. We're sure God will take care of that somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we'll just make up something. We don't know. So we'll just make up
Yeah.
something.
Well, just to shut your question down.
Yes. Yes. We really don't want to have to think through all the mental gymnastics of how we can possibly make this work. So you said you're in your 30s now. So what were your 20s like? Was it still working? Christianity still working?
Well, okay, so I took a break from the Adventist church probably for the rest of high school. And then once I got to college, I was like, okay, maybe we can try this again. So, and I don't know, I guess it's this like longing to belong, why I
Yes.
kind of went back every couple of years and tried to be a little bit more devout. So, I got into college. College was very difficult. Uh, Academically, and then just being on my own, just having that independence and having to navigate friendships and relationships in a more complex way. Like, I just did not have the skills for that, because again, harkening back to the religious upbringing, you're not really told about, I mean, the Bible is not, I'm not saying that there aren't any good principles in there, but you can't apply what's happening there to the 21st century. It does not compute.
Yes,
So
I
it
agree.
just, yeah, so it doesn't answer a lot of the burning questions and like the practical situations that you might get into. Like, it's not really well applied. So in college, I there were a lot of Adventists there, because there were a lot of Caribbean Americans, and a lot of Caribbeans tend to be Adventist. So
Huh. I did not know that.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Especially like Jamaicans. Um,
Hmm.
so when I got into college, I was rooming with a roommate that was a high school classmate of mine, and she was a Christian, but like a non-denominational Christian, and kind of more conservative, right wing leaning, as much as you can be at 18. At 18, you're just following what your parents tell you to do, okay? Like, I was too. And now I have my own thoughts, obviously, and I've been able to flesh them out a little bit more because I've had more experience. But so she was more kind of on that side. And in the very, very beginning of college, like after the first couple of months, I experienced a sexual assault. And
Oh, I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So my whole world kind of just like got turned upside down. And I think I wasn't really going to church in the very beginning of college. But after
Mhm.
that, I was like, okay, maybe I can try to get in cool with these Adventists, go to church, go to their potlucks, join their club that they have. They have events or whatever. And I met, again, a couple of nice people that were around my age that were, I think, genuinely good people. Like they were just trying to do their best. And they're young and dumb. We're all young and dumb. Uh, but again, I was going through that sexual assault. And are these people that I can really talk to about that? No. Are they going to blame me? Yes. So it's like I really couldn't relate to them. And I don't think they could really relate to what I was going through as far as like the trauma that I experienced. So, and I didn't have a car. So to get to the church, it was all the way on the other side of town. So I would have to take the bus that only ran every hour on a Saturday. And if some event ran late, then I was going to be SOL. And even I don't know, some weird things happened. Like I remember I had dreadlocks in the very beginning of college, or I started them, like in the very beginning of college. And I remember one of the guys in the church, he said to me, like what man is going to want to have a wife or a girlfriend that has dreadlocks? Meanwhile, all the girls loved my hair. Like the girls were always touching my hair and they loved the hair. But this man who's a black man, a dark skinned black man, he says to me that my dreadlocks are not appropriate for to be a woman, to be a wife.
That is, I don't know exactly that experience, but I don't even know how to articulate my question. Like he has the privilege of being a man, but he also understands the systemic, like with racism. And yet here he is feeling this is okay to tell you how you should do your hair because it matters what some imaginary future spouse may be remotely interested in. I'm sorry. I don't know what to
Yeah,
say.
it leaves a person speechless, like kind of to hear these things. And for me to even repeat it back, I'm just like, wow, like if someone were to say that now, I would just rip them a new one verbally, you know? Because I've been able to come up with clapbacks as I've gotten older. But
Yes. Yeah.
when I was younger, I was just so shocked. And again,
Hmm.
you know, having this religion, it teaches you to be modest and to be quiet, to shut the F up. You're a woman, your place is to be quiet. So even though I didn't really fully believe those things, I wasn't fully invested in that doctrine, it still had an effect on me to be quiet and to not rock the boat and to not be controversial. And then it's the self-hatred piece for me as well, because
Mm.
and I learned more about my history as time went on, but being a person of African descent, of West African descent, because I know that Ethiopians have a different relationship to Christianity than West Africans do.
Ethiopian Christianity is very old, isn't it?
It's much
Like it's
older,
very much older. Okay, that's what I
much
thought.
older. Christianity didn't come to West Africa until the Portuguese brought it there in the 15th century, I believe.
Mm.
So this religion was forced on my people,
Yes.
and it comes with the racism, the
Hmm.
sexism, the homophobia, like all of those are intricately tied into the Christianity that was taught to my people, to really all Americans. I mean, in the Americas,
Oh
it's the
yes.
same. It's really the same thing. We're indoctrinated with this BS. So then, for someone to say that to me, I mean, it's just par for the course for this religion. Like, how could he be uplifting me as a woman, as a black woman, as someone that has dreadlocks that's not fitting into the status quo? How could he uplift me? He's literally been fed his entire life a racist, homophobic, sexist, prejudicial doctrine.
Yeah.
So it's not, I was shocked back then, but I'm not surprised now.
Yeah.
It's just another arm, like what we've been taught. It's just another arm of supremacy. That's what it is. Christianity,
Hmm.
the way it's functioning in the West. I'm not saying all Christians are this way,
Oh yeah.
but it is an unconscious bias, and they're unconsciously being taught this rhetoric. They're not even aware of it. Even if they have good intentions, they think they have good intentions.
we're swimming in it. We don't even know that it's there until someone points it out. And then as a person, like as a white person, I have a choice. I can be super fragile and embarrassed and like have all my feelings and center them and be like, because it's what I want to do. Oh my goodness, I just got embarrassed because this person called out something that I said or did. Or I can be like, okay, they are showing me that I have been swimming in this, and now I either pay attention to it or I don't. But moving forward, what know better, do better. Know better, do better.
Of course.
I don't know where you were headed. You were
Yeah, so this is me in college, and it kind of reminded me of something, a quick tangent, but then I'll bring it back to college. I'm pretty good at staying on task, pretty good. But it just reminds me because we're talking about how we're swimming in this, and it's not really it. I don't think any white person, black person, Asian person, Spanish person, purple, blue, whatever, should feel like, wow, I'm just the scum of the earth because I am what I am. But we all have a responsibility to, like you said, know better, do better. But for instance, like the other day, I went to a church service because my cousin had a baby dedication for her baby, and I was going there to support my cousin and my family. It was at a non-denominational church, a pretty large one. I would even consider it probably a mega church. And the sermon was racist. It was homophobic to a predominantly sexist. He even talked crap about progressive Christians. And he's saying this to a predominantly Hispanic and Black American / Caribbean American congregation. And everyone was like, yes, pastor. Yes, say that. We're enjoying this, like repeating what the pastor was saying. Because I didn't want to repeat what the pastor was saying, because I wasn't in agreement with what he was saying, my aunt hit me with a pen that she had in her hand. She hit me because I wouldn't repeat what the pastor was saying. So again, talk about swimming. It's swimming in hatred.
Yeah.
And someone has to be put down for other people to be elevated. That is the Western Christian theocratic way. Like that is Christian supremacy. We got to put these people down to lift ourselves up. We have to have an enemy to rally around. So let's rally around. Let's talk crap about you for being from the Caribbean. If you practice any sort of voodoo, whatever, you're a piece of crap. You're not going to be saved unless you come to this side and do what we tell you to do. To practice this religion in this way that has nothing to do with your culture. Forget what you know and conform so we can control you. I mean, I don't even know if all pastors know that's what they're doing. But even if they're not conscious, that's what they're doing. They're trying to get you in line to forget yourself so that you don't feel anything. You don't feel that you're being, that hate is being, spat at you from the pew. Everyone was just internalizing these hateful messages. Imagine what that's doing to their bodies, to their souls, to their minds, hearing those messages day in and day out. I was aware, but I was literally having a panic attack in the church at the time.
Oh, because again, your body knows it. And it makes you wonder how disconnected the congregation members have to be from their own bodies, their own consciousness, their own, like your own morality to be able to just suck it all in and think it's good and think this is good and right.
Sometimes it really just hits me like how sinister and insidious all of this is. So, and the thing is, sometimes it's difficult to feel these feelings every day because I have a job to do. I've got to take care of myself. But when I'm in those quiet moments, maybe when I am in the shower or before bed, sometimes it really gets to me. Or I'm driving, on a dark road or whatever in the middle of the night. I'm like, this is really actually evil. That the goal of these people, even if they don't know it, is to make us feel disconnected from ourselves. Because when you're disconnected from your natural spirituality, that is when it's very easy to subjugate you. That's one of the ways to subjugate somebody, is to disconnect them from their natural spirituality.
I love that. What do you mean by that? Because Yeah. What do you mean by
To
that?
disconnect them, well, to disconnect them from their connection to themselves and to their desires, um, to their physiology, for one, because like you said, these people, maybe they weren't noticing their heart racing or their breathing quickening. Maybe those
Mhm.
um like anatomical responses were suppressed. For me, I was like, "Ah." Also, like, he talked about how nature was evil. So when I say natural spirituality, I even mean like your connection to actual nature.
Mhm.
Because he talked about how crystals were evil. Hello, crystals grow in the ground. How are those evil? What?
They're
How does that even
rocks.
make sense? He talked about how hurricanes were evil. They're a natural phenomenon that has no consciousness, or like, you know. So I was like, so what? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, how could he even say that? He's not like a meteorologist or anything like that. He was just going off in about how incense was evil. So is perfume evil too?
Who gets to decide which versions of different things are good and which ones are bad? And
Exactly. If incense is evil, how come holy water is not?
mm,
You know, if mala beads are evil, why are Catholic prayer beads okay? It's just,
mhm.
it's like, there's a lot of witchcraft in Christianity, a lot of magical workings in Christianity, but it's their version
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah, kind of like the superstition.
Just like the superstition. The Christian ones are okay, about the angels and the demons and all that stuff, that's okay. But if it has any sort of indigenous African sway to it, that's evil. It's because they don't want you to actually connect to your roots and to connect to the land. Why
Mm.
do you think we have so many people fighting about? Oh, how about this? Why do you think we have so many people, yeah, fighting so that we don't know America's real history? Why are the American Indians all but erased from general society? And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not, because my place is not really in the political realm. I'm really more about, like, if what I say can help somebody undo some of the brainwashing that they've experienced, then I feel like I am fulfilling my purpose, because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through for as long as I did, and just
Yeah.
the ramifications, especially, like, yeah, the physical ramifications, just like trusting my body, um, eating disorders. It was a lot of it was physical. Yeah, eating disorders, it, sexual assault. Maybe that would have been prevented if I were more grounded in myself. I have a
Mhm.
fiance now, and I know I'm a little bit off on a tangent. I'll try to get back to, like, where we were talking. But yeah, with my fiance, I sometimes have a hard time, oftentimes have a hard time being intimate in the moment with this person, because I've been taught that this is wrong, this is evil, we're bad. Like, I can't even mesh with this person the way I want to, because, again, that disconnection from self was a byproduct of this religious upbringing. And
Yeah.
I will be damned if my relationship has issues because of this stupid religious upbringing.
You are not alone in that, and I'm sure you're aware how many people. I assume a little bit older than you, but it's like there's a generation plus of us who our marriages and our sex lives and our just friendships, relationships, monogamy, non-monogamy. I mean, so many things that people are like, I'm just trying to figure this out because I spent the first 20 years of my life being told there are good things and there are bad things. There are holy things and there are sinful things. And suddenly now I'm like, oh, I don't believe any of these things, they don't just magically go away when you change your thinking. It doesn't work that easily. So how did you get where you are now?
Okay, so in college, essentially, so I'll kind of try to fast forward now. So in college, I broke away from that group of Adventists that I was kind of hanging out with, and
Mhm.
because I wasn't living in my body, because I didn't know how to, I would do a lot of things to self-medicate, and that lasted for years.
Mm,
Although I'm
yeah.
a decently intellectual person, I'm a little bit of an academic, but I'm also not like a type A weirdo. But yeah, I want to be a smart person. I want to have a career, whatever. So in college, I struggled in college because with that sexual assault, I couldn't focus on school. So obviously, I turned to alcohol. I turned to abusing drugs. I turned to um, sex with people that I wasn't happy with, that I didn't have a real connection with. Because the thing is, I'm not a person that's like, oh, non-monogamy is a bad thing, or serial dating is a bad thing, or anything like that. I think you have to do what is edifying to you. But for me, I was trying to fill a void. I was trying to numb myself out. And so I ended up moving back down to South Florida and taking some classes in order to apply for medical school. But I ended up switching so that I could go to veterinary school. So I was taking my classes and just still trying to figure it out. And then I got into veterinary school. Uh, but here I am struggling. I wasn't healed. I still was self-medicating. So I got to veterinary school, and, I'm alone, in the Midwest. It's cold. I have no family. I am, it was not a very diverse school. Like, I was in a class of like 160 something. I was the only person with two Black parents.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so it wasn't very diverse. There were a lot of microaggressions. Uh, there's a lot of racism, and there's a lot of prejudice there in the Midwest. And I remember all those shootings of unarmed people were kind of making the news cycle more regularly. Like that's when it really, like, I would say like the mid 2010s, that's when it really started hitting the news cycle a lot more. And it was very disheartening because I felt like the Christians that I knew, because that's kind of when I started trying to go back to the Adventist church one more time. Because there were a few Adventist churches in the area. And there was one that had a young pastor. It was a predominantly African American church. And I was like, I guess I'll try this one out. And of course, he did speak to some of these issues of police brutality. But the classmates that I had that were Christians, they were very conservative and um, didn't think police brutality was a real thing. They just weren't safe people to talk to about these issues. Politics are not
Yeah.
like, they weren't safe, and they didn't seem to have much sympathy or empathy for what I was going through. Like, luckily I have my dog. Like, that's my soul dog.
Oh,
He
wow.
he got me through, like, and that's why I became a veterinarian in the first place, because I don't know, animals, they just have this light about them. They're just so pure. Even the ones that are trying to kill you in the clinic, they're still
I
so
agree.
friggin' pure. Like, I know you're trying to choke me out right now, but it's fine. Yeah, it's like there are times where he was all I had. Like, I'm just crying onto him. His face is wet with my tears. So
Hmm.
I was like, okay, these people are supposed to be Christians. They're supposed to be all about love. And wasn't Jesus supposed to be about justice, about the little person? Supposedly, but I'm not feeling that at all right now. Like, I'm feeling very isolated. And I just don't think these people, whatever doctrine they believe, I don't think that is in alignment with who I am as a person, my heritage, like my values. And so that's really
Yeah.
when I was like, okay, like, I need to start researching maybe more about, like, what were Jamaicans like, what did they believe maybe indigenously, like,
Oh,
what did
wow.
the indigenous
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
believe, the indigenous people of Jamaica, but also like the Africans, like, what were their belief systems, what were they taking from, like, what kind of things were maybe preserved, because that's another thing. If Christianity is so all about love and light and about peace, okay, so why do you have to wipe out other people's religions? Why
Hmm.
do you have to make obeah illegal and punishable by death in Jamaica if you're all about love and light and peace? Why did you take these Native American children and force them into these boarding schools, take them away from their families, and try to mold them into whatever you wanted them to be? That's not right.
Mm-mm.
Part of Western Christianity has been about erasing histories and creating new dogmas and new standards. So, and that it pisses me off like so much, like how much of our history was taken away, and like where maybe all of us, where this nation could be now, generally, if we didn't have this overarching. I mean, I know there's no main religion in the United States, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a de facto religion,
Yeah.
and it's Christianity.
Christianity, I think, at least for now, is still the majority. I
Yeah,
don't know how that's changing or anything.
still the majority for sure.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that just pisses me off so much. So I was thinking about that in veterinary school. And so I researched more about that. And I talked to some people that were more like indigenous practitioners, like that practiced voodoo or practiced like nature-based spirituality, or they practiced witchcraft and things like that. And I was like, okay, this is more edifying to me because it speaks to the connection with nature. It's uplifting to people of all genders, and all
Yeah.
races, all sexual orientations. It's really about looking within and not just like taking what someone tells you. And when I say like nature based spirituality, I'll use that as the catch all because a lot of things fall under that. Um, yeah, it's really about looking within, doing your shadow work, and not just taking what someone tells you as truth. Like it's about finding your own truths through your experiences and through opening yourself up to these experiences, taking that quiet time to meditate or being out in nature or to write or to read, listening to your body, paying attention to your breathing, feeling your heart, like just those simple things. Like you don't need a wand necessarily or some crystals or some sage. Those things are ways to get yourself into the headspace and to create a setting, but really all you need is yourself, to practice like a nature-based spirituality. So yeah, and so then over the years, as like towards the maybe the end of my graduate studies, and then yeah, go up until now, that's kind of what I've been trying to do. And the pandemic helped a lot with that because it gave me a chance, because I was struggling a lot, like mentally still struggling. But the pandemic just gave everybody a chance to just sit down and shut the F up and to evaluate what was going on. Like, why are you still self medicating with bad relationships? Like, you deserve more
Mm-hmm.
than that. I know that you weren't told that when you were growing up in this fundamentalist religion, but yeah, you deserve to say no. You deserve to do things that only feel good for you. Um, not everyone has access to your time or your space. And these are like radical thoughts for me. But the pandemic really gave me a chance to and connect with like-minded people that also were on a similar path of like internal work, shedding uh, the lies that we were all fed as children.
Now, were you able to find real people to have these conversations with, or was this online? Because I know for me, it's been only, for the most part, online.
Oh wow, yeah, for sure. I think mostly online, but I do have. I'm very lucky to have a few people that I know, like IRL, like in real life, that are also kind of more on the nature based side. They're like spiritual but not religious.
Mm-hmm.
That are just on this earth to try to figure things out and to try to do the best that they can without dictating to other people like what's the right way.
Yeah.
I have a few people in my life like that. But online, like Instagram with the whole like hashtag deconstruction and everything has been so helpful because everybody's different. Like this podcast is the Graceful Atheist, right? But
Yes.
there are people in the deconstruction community that yes are atheists, agnostics,
Mm-hmm.
humanists, secularists. There are people that are still Christians. There are
Yes.
Hindus, Buddhists, and ex evangelicals of all sorts. But we all respect each other, and we're all invested in the idea that your spiritual path is yours and yours alone, and no one else can tell you what's right for you. It just the audacity of these fundamentalist religions to tell people that they know you better than you know yourself. It's just it's really so, I feel like an obvious feeling of disgust right now when I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what, all of us that have kind of, for lack of a better term, woken up. The rest of us are like, she's an atheist. She's doing her thing. She respects me. I respect her. That's the,
Yeah.
and I always use this phrase. That's the reasonable conclusion that she came to based on her life experiences. My reasonable conclusion was nature-based spirituality because, to me, water is life. So if anything's gonna be God, it's gonna be water. so,
I love
so
it.
that
Yeah.
that's kind of how I would sum up what I believe. But yeah, so, and that's the conclusion that I came to, because when I was suffering and crying and, depressed, where did I go to find healing and to find edification? I took my kayak out by myself, exposed to the elements, and that's where I found peace. So that's what I came to, and that's me. But I would not say, "Oh, you have to be a sea witch to be, right with the world." Like, no, that's just what I decided to do.
And it makes sense. Thinking back to the ancient times, people worshiped the sun, they worshiped the seasons, they worshiped water, and it makes sense. I
Mhm.
mean, these are the things, like you said, that give you life. Without them, we will die.
Yes,
If we can't guarantee that the sun is going to come back in the springtime in a way that's going to make everything start growing, it's going to get warmer, that's bad for everyone. I love springtime. That's one of the things that gives me hope is just every
yeah,
spring I know, like today my boys and I went to the state park and we walked by some plant. I don't know plants. It was a plant. But it had little buds. And I was like, ah, spring. Like I know
yeah,
it's only February and it's kind of a faux spring in Georgia where it's warm and then it'll be cold again, but
yeah,
it's like it's coming. The birds, I can tell the birds are changing and getting excited about finding a mate and I love it.
for
It
sure.
totally makes sense. And it's funny, the atheist world, we're very like sciency and
Mhm.
we just like research and blah blah blah. But it's like there is so much science and research behind like, oh my gosh, just go outside and be around trees. Go look at water. Just quiet yourself. Sit somewhere that there aren't other people or there aren't buildings. Like you just there's so much truth in all of that. It is very healing for our bodies and our mind and yep, everything that you said.
Definitely.
We're coming to a close. Is there anything I should have asked, Kat, that I did not ask that you would like to talk about? We have a few more minutes.
Oh, I just have like one other thought, I guess. Because I do think that like my belief system, for me, it feels, not saying that it's concrete, but like, again, like you were saying, the water, the sun, all these things are things that we can rely on, that we need to live, and there are things that I can touch and that I can access. Whereas, right, and so to me that is concrete in that we can physically access these things. A lot of the more lofty things, like if I'm going to place like an actual deity onto it, those are things that are can't necessarily be proven. You know what I mean? So for someone to use their deities uh as not just a personal like totem, but to try to expand that to everybody else and to try to make it fact, it
Mm-hmm.
falls apart every single time. And maybe that's why I would maybe consider myself more of an agnostic theist
Mm.
at this juncture, just because I cannot say with certainty where the heck we came from, why the heck we're here, or where we're going. I can't say that. And I say that to my mom all the time. Like, we don't know where we came from. Big Bang. Where the heck did that Big Bang come from? Like, like whatever created us, entity or whatever, it's beyond probably our understanding. It's beyond the time and space probably of this dimension. So I'm not even going to pretend to apply what I believe to every single universe and all time and infinity. So it is to me foolish for any religion to again claim to be the only way. And that's what I hold on to, because once I started to think more along those lines, that's when I started to feel more freedom that I could leave Seventh-day Adventism, because they don't know the truth. None of us know the truth.
Yeah.
They're just using this doctrine because it's a way, it's popular enough people are invested in this belief system, so enough people can be controlled with it. So
Yeah.
that gives me some sort of peace that I know once I started to believe the way I do believe, that's when I was able to stop drinking, stop having relationships with people that were sucky for me, that were emotionally unavailable, you know, start working on my career and like being where I am now, where like I have money to eat and I live in a nice enough place and I can afford to bring my fiance from his country over here. Things like that. I wouldn't be able to do that if I were still being harmed, really, just being harmed by this religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
So it's given me a piece, a taste of freedom, and I'm craving and yearning and reaching for that every day.
I love it. That's awesome. I love it so much. Kat, how can people connect with you online?
Okay, well, I have an IG, and so the name on there is Cat Delmar, but the handle is at Cat Mangrove, cat like the animal, mangrove like the tree. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then it has my link tree. So I have a Twitter and a little YouTube channel that I have like a couple videos. I might post a couple more, but I'm really not like a camera person. I like to write way more.
I understand.
But I have a couple of things I want to get out. I ranted a little bit in this interview. But I just feel like I want to at least have a space where if someone is feeling like me, like they're questioning Adventism or questioning their religion, like at least they can be like, oh, so this person went through this, and that, and they came to this conclusion. Cool. All right. So it's possible. So yeah, the Instagram is probably the best. And then you can find all the links from there.
That sounds great. And yes, we'll put everything in the show notes. So, Kat, thank you again for being on the Graceful Atheist.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
My final thoughts on the episode. I really enjoyed this episode with Kat. This was a fun conversation. I love hearing how passionate she is, the things that make her angry and frustrated, and the things that when she was younger, she had so many questions that couldn't get answered. They couldn't get good answers. And now she can think through things and ask questions and wonder and seek awe and hope and beauty in nature, in her own body, in her relationships, without the shame and guilt. The shame and guilt may still come every now and then because years and years and years of being indoctrinated with things, like it doesn't just magically disappear out of your body when you change your beliefs. That's just not, it's not a true thing. But she is finding hope and beauty and wonder in the world, and it's fabulous. I just love it. This was a wonderful, funny, enjoyable conversation. And Kat, thank you again for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure.
The Secular Grace Thought of the Week is about meeting new people. If you've listened to the podcast at all, you know that I am definitely an introvert. And all of us have just gone through an incredible amount of time during lockdown and COVID, and it just feels like we are now coming out of our cocoons for the first time. This weekend, I had the opportunity to go to PodConf in Portland, Oregon, where a bunch of independent podcasters got together and we got to share ideas with each other. And this is the first time for a non-work event that I've been in a public venue, and it was amazing. I got to meet really very interesting people. And I also had the opportunity to share about the podcast with literally brand new people who had no context, and see in many of the people that I got to speak with the sparkle in their eye. Just the title, Graceful Atheist, the concept of secular grace, something that my motivated reasoning leads me to believe that people really want and people really need. And it was really exciting to get to share with people who had never heard of the podcast at all, as well as share a bit of experience of building a podcast and what that is like. But the point I want to make is that we may need to make an effort, particularly those of us who are introverts, to connect with people who we don't know, connect with people who are literally strangers. A little bit of effort on our part will go a very long way. Trust me, coming from an introvert, it was absolutely worth it. We should make that a practice in our lives. I am very interested in in-person connections with people who are in the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group and or just people who have listened to the podcast. I really want to encourage you that if you are interested in starting something in your area, meetup.com is super simple. You can just throw something out there, meet at a library or a coffee house, and you will be amazed at the connection that you will get. I'm trying to figure out how we can make this more practical and easier for people to do. I'm very much interested in your participation. Let me know your experience, if it works, what doesn't work, and let's see what we can do to help build human connection in the secular grace community. Next week is Joanna Johnson, who has written the book Silenced in Eden. It is a painful story of sexual abuse and recovery, as well as her deconversion. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network.